One of the hardest things to do as an investor is to know when it's time to change, when it's time to stay the course. Matt wanted to call this video Art with Tim. At the end of the day, we are going to draw up the framework that helps guide our decision making here at 10. Like so many things that seem to matter most in our life, building wealth, health, fitness, they take time and they're full of a lot of traps. And one of the traps is when you're doing it the right way, or maybe the only way to reach those goals, there are so many days where you're putting in grinding work and discipline and looking in the proverbial mirror or the account and just not seeing the progress you want to see. Somewhat like we talked about with the boat and the wind and whether to know whether it's just waiting for the right weather of the boat. Shifting things up all the time, whether it's your investment strategy, your workout strategy, and taking these radical moves is hardly going to be the thing that helps get you there. It's not going to quicken the pace. It is that slow and steady discipline and consistency. And so we often get the question here, when do you know how to change things? Why are things changing as much as they are, or why aren't they changing more? They're great questions. And I think one of the important things I wanted to be able to share is, again, what is our framework for making decisions? And there's some things that guide it. There's some areas to a healthy, well-built process that rarely, if ever, change. And then there are other things that you may not see that are changing all the time. And so I wanted to help lay that out conceptually this week. We'll follow it up with a practical application next week. So what is this first thing that helps? Well, the first thing is, what is your philosophy? A lot goes into this. A book you'll hear me talk about ad nauseum for the next year or two that I highly recommend you read. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. But he asks kind of these 19 big questions around what is it that drives your process, your beliefs from, do you believe you can time markets or not? Most people would say no. Again, most people try to engage in some form of market timing. How important do you think diversification and having some margin of safety, room for error is within a plan? What do you think of the role of risk versus luck, greed, and fear? What are those combinations? They're all critically important to understand. And once you've set those beliefs and really thought through them, this is something that should be bedrock, that rarely ever should change. How do you think through costs? I love his analogy in that book that, as we've said, volatility is the price you pay as an investor to make money over time. He talked about how we need to change our mindsets, accept that, it's going to take time and enduring volatility, but it isn't a fine. How we tend to think of it as like we've gotten a ticket or a fine, that we've done something wrong, as opposed to it's just the price of admission to, again, get to take the ride that we want to take. So what is this? A lot of people want to skip it. Let's hurry up and get to I'm a well-built guy in my workout or a multimillionaire, but this is where it starts. What is the philosophy that's going to drive that process? The second one is your partner. Who's going to help you implement this? Who's that proverbial trainer, contractor, builder, whatever analogy you want to use? Obviously, advisor in our case. It's going to come alongside. Who's going to understand maybe how to help you build this out, find the right subs, tools, as we'll talk about here in a second. I can't think of an area where this is more important or misunderstood than investing, because it's so easy to look back like a great picture in a fitness magazine, look back and look at the huge market returns. And yet, if you've ever seen one of those charts with all the news stories, man, there's so many ways that you could get tripped up, thrown off course, tricked into making the wrong move at the wrong time. Partner, your builder, your advisor, a little self-interested here, but again, something that should be a long-term relationship. Getting to know one another, like getting to know your philosophy, becomes critical to really letting it set in and see that application. How do you know when to change either one of these? Well, this might be a massive life circumstance. This might be a partner who's just simply not listening or building what you want to see in terms of what has been agreed to from a philosophical level. But the next thing in the thing is process. Again, process. I know this looks like a pyramid. I would argue it's a little bit more like an iceberg. A lot of stuff that's behind the scenes that people don't want to focus on. This is where we start talking about things, to use an analogy again of subcontractors and tools. Are they going to change? Sure. You might need a certain sub for this or that. a different asset class for this or that. But for the most part, you're going to go back to your trusted asset classes, your trusted partners, for us, a lot of investment partners, and go to them unless something really radically changes. And this is probably one of the key areas where we see things get a little confusing, is people say, we've kind of been investing in the same basket of stuff. Well, for most investors, liquidity concerns, risk concerns, the stocks, bonds, real estate, combinations thereof are going to be where we're going to want to live most of the time. What are the conditions for changing these? One of your key subs leaves, one of your key fund managers leaves, an asset class just gets completely ugly, as bonds did in 2020 from a risk-adjusted return. Then you start to make those changes. But as we talk about, again, these bedrock things shouldn't be changing a lot. And when they're not changing, it's probably more indicative of things going well or being well built than being neglected or ignored. Lastly is positions. These are the materials. These are going to change. Some people like ETFs, some want funds, some want SMAs, the different materials you might want in your house. If you look at the funds we use, they don't change with great frequency because we like our partners. Underneath the hood, you see a lot of turnover. We're going to cover that next week. So again, where are we talking about making decisions along the process? What type of natural restraint should we be showing? More on the philosophical level, maybe a little less on the position level, to make sure we're not making rash decisions, that we're following a process, that we're not letting those emotions that love to trip us up get in the way. We'll stop right there. Next week we'll come back with a practical application of how this all applies to an investor with a real world scenario.